either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And our final deep dive for the month of Miike, I chose something a little less extreme, something a little bit more accessible. I chose Hara-Kiri, Death of a Samurai, to kind of round out the goriness and keep the action going just a little bit.
Sure, action going just a little bit is... The little bit is the emphasis here.
Yes. Also, just to show a little bit more of a breadth of Miike's directorial
I will
works.
say, compared to what we've talked about so far, this is a very different direction than the ones we've already discussed. And it was a lot of fun, because you can definitely still tell that it's him. It has a lot of his Hallmark trading cards in it. But the styling was so different than what we had been watching earlier.
Yes, and we had also not done a samurai flick in a while, and I wanted to do something a little bit different, because this is also an adaptation of a book. And a remake of a much older movie.
Yes.
And I didn't want to do 13 Assassins, so...
Yeah, that's understandable. That's definitely his most well-known samurai film, but I do think this one encapsulates the old style of the previous samurai movies, where it's honestly a lot of dialogue.
Yes.
That builds up to one or two cool fights.
Mm-hmm. So, for those who don't know, Hara-Kiri, Death of a Samurai is and I didn't know this when I first saw this movie, a 3D remake of the 1962 masterpiece Hara-Kiri that tells the tale of a poverty-stricken ronin who takes revenge upon the lord who showed no compassion for his son in the time of need.
Yes. I think technically the name changes very slightly if it's not the 3D version of it, just for distribution rights, what I found when trying to do some fun Googling on it, but... Yeah, I was not aware this was 3D, and honestly, I didn't notice any, forced 3D, so I would be interested to see this someday in the intended 3D effect. Yeah,
that's what I was curious about, too, because I don't think we've had the 3D release, and I've only seen it on, a poster here and there.
Yeah.
And like you said, it doesn't have any of those Hallmark 3D bullshit moments that we really hate.
It really doesn't have, and it doesn't even have anything that could, be then second put onto three-dimensionally. There's not a whole lot of, even the action feels very much like a stage play version of action, so, nothing ever feels like it's really coming at you very far, so I do wonder if this 3D is, ever so slightly, depth sort of 3D. I have no idea. I cannot imagine
I don't know.
this.
Maybe the snow. That's, the only thing I could maybe see.
We are going to get to the snow. I have lots to say about the snow.
Yeah. So... As I said, Hara-Kiri, Death of a Samurai is, and I'll probably just call it Hara-Kiri going forward.
Sure.
Is based on the novel by Yasuhiko Takaguchi, with screenplay by Kikumi Yamagishi, directed by Takashi Miike.
Of course.
It stars Koji Yakusho, Munetaka Aoki, and Nato Takanaka.
Got him.
Yes. And as with all our other foreign films, like to bring the actors in to the forefront that people might have seen them in. Yakusho was in Perfect Days, which was recently Japan's nomination for Best Foreign Film at the Academy Awards, I think just last year.
Yeah.
But was also Nobu in Memoirs of a Geisha. I think the dude who has the scars on his face.
I think most people are going to recognize him from that.
Possibly. Outside of that, he's been in the cult classic that's now in the Criterion Collection, Cure, as well as Miike's 13 Assassins, and was the voice of Mirai and Belle, which actually perfect timing. SP Filmviewers just released their review on Belle, so go check them out.
There you go.
Aoki was in Godzilla -1, as well as the Rurouni Kenshin live actions and Battle Royale 2, the shittier one.
Yeah.
Oh, and also Silence, the one religious flick that we keep finding Japanese actors from.
That is true. Strange, but yes.
Yeah, I think this is probably our 8th or 9th movie that we've found someone tied to.
Eventually we're going to have to just do that movie.
At some point. As for Takanaka, he's been in Temple, which I know has been floating around Netflix for quite a while, and I still need to watch it. And a few other movies that keep popping up to go through streaming. But I personally know him from other stuff like Shinya Tsukamoto's Hiruko the Goblin, Tokyo Fist, Angel Gut 5, Red Vertigo, Guinea Pig 4, Devil Woman, Doctor, as well as Robo Geisha, Mutant Girl Squad, just to name a few. Also,
yeah, those are all in a genre.
Yeah, he's also been in Miike's Andromedia and Ley Lines.
Okay, so, he's been around, just not in the media that I think most people would recognize him from.
Just media that I recognize him from.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. So, no special features this time around.
There were none.
I didn't even listen to the special features. I did rewatch the original Hara-Kiri just to refresh my memory as well.
Very good. I did not watch the 1962 Hara-Kiri.
It's very good.
I'm sure it is. I spent a lot of time trying to find, honestly, anything to really, extra to back up, but unfortunately this one is so heavily overshadowed by 13 that there's not as much to go off of without just regurgitating the stuff that was done and perfected for that movie.
Yeah, there's a little bit of history, maybe some mythology that I kind of dived into a little bit, but nothing super conclusive.
Yeah,
for
sure.
me.
It is pretty much a very modern but standard version of a samurai film.
Yes. And before we start, Chris, what are we drinking today?
You have found for us a sake. This one is Yomi, and it has a cool mask on it.
Yeah, I thought it was fitting since Yomi is the underworld in Japanese Shintoism.
Very cool, and I like that the mask fits the whole samurai theme. Very cool.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers. A little sweet. Very nice.
Yeah, not bad. So, Hara-Kiri, Death of a Samurai.
Yes.
It is a very simple and silent opening credits and title card, which I personally like because it's slow, sets kind of the mood of how the movie's gonna start.
It sets the pace because even though this is a very traditionally styled samurai film, this is a 2-hour-long samurai film. And the pace is the same throughout.
Yeah.
Even during the fighting.
Yeah, it's not like Seven Samurai that's got a bit of action in between its 3-hour runtime.
Yeah, no, this one is... It is a very standard styling, so we have all of the build-ups, and then finally the, conclusion at the end is a very standard storytelling. It's just 2 hours long. So having the credits be very slow allows you to have a moment to think to yourself, do I have all the snacks I need?
I guess. For me, I actually really like it because, you get to see the pretty architecture. So.
It is very pretty. The whole movie's pretty.
But just the way it uses the light and dark to really start setting the tone of the movie from the get-go. It's a bit ominous with the demon bull painting. There's
True.
a lot of red for the Ishii's family clan.
Yes.
This completely blows my mind. It's heparinized as Ishii, but everywhere else it's 2 eyes.
I don't know. I cannot tell you. I just know what they said in the movie.
Yeah, I don't know. And also there's a little bit of a focus on a cat that I'll get into a little bit later. I
do love the reoccurrence of the cat.
Yeah, I'll get into it later. But
okay.
the reason I wanted to do this one over 13 Assassins is because this is probably... I hadn't seen Big Bang Juvenile A yet, and of the artsier Miike movies, I probably would have chosen that one over this one.
Sure.
Surprisingly. But this of the movies I had seen up until that point, up until our planning portion, was the artsiest film of his I think I'd seen.
It is very artsy. I do like that you picked this one, though, because this movie, I think, is maybe the best portrayal of Miike's own... declaration of what he sees himself as a director. He sees himself very much as being a, love storyteller, and this is, peak drama style love story where it's the perfect tragedy story.
I don't know if that's true for later Miike. I know, here's the thing with Miike is, I personally, I've brought up, I love listening to his interviews and talking. He doesn't see himself as a quote-unquote director in the traditional sense.
Sure.
He's only a director when he's actually directing a movie.
Sure. However, I do think that his, his love of drama, his love of over-the-top scenes, and his love of, a romantic interest of some kind have all come together very nicely for this movie.
Yeah, not as sexy as Ichi the Killer, but...
No, it's not. Everything here is very subtle, and I appreciate it because unlike Ichi the Killer, which used almost all of Miike's own styling to, portray what it was he was trying to go for, which is why, honestly, a lot of his movies end up being kind of niche, especially for a Western audience. This one relies very heavily on works that he already admired in previous samurai styling films, which he's already talked about a lot, about how not only did he create a whole bunch, but he took a lot of inspiration from the ones he watched growing up. This one is a very nice, like, updating of a classic tragedy, almost Shakespearean style.
Yeah, in a way, but not fully like Kurosawa Throne of Blood or
no, it's
Ran.
It's still unmistakably Miike's work.
Mm-hmm.
But he has that framework, which from the get-go is easy to see, like, in how he's using the light and the shadows and how the sets are, like, they only come in two forms. Very fancy and just deteriorating to hell.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think that's you're picking up onto something that's
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the political point of part of this movie.
Yes, definitely.
And so, from this very slow crawl, we have a ronin who approaches Hikone Castle and requests to commit ritual suicide.
Yes.
Which, the dialogue is quickly showing his nuances in the movie, too. There's not really, like, a lot of fluff to some of the writing. At least early on. I think the movie does break down a little bit later, which I'll talk about, but the dialogue is very heavy up front, but necessary to provide the intent of Hanshiro.
Mm-hmm.
We have plenty of dark and foreboding shots, and also some of the acting from Ichikawa is amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
He has this like subtle raise in interest when Chijiwa Motome is mentioned of like, hey, we had someone do this recently. Are you sure you want to go through with it?
Yes, it's very convincing.
Yeah, and the use of shadow is beautiful in this movie throughout. Hanshiro starts in the light, but after quick kind of hearing what roughly happened, we get a little more shadow that comes down on him. And I don't know if that's 100% intentional, but it's a nice touch.
It's a very nice touch. I'd like to think it's intentional, but it's hard to tell because I think the other portions that are clearly, like, Miike added to the film are honestly heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to think that he did this intentionally. It is hard to tell, though.
Oh, very, very much so. But I think that's what's beautiful about it is you don't know what exactly is intentional with some of the weather in this movie, minus the snow.
Yeah, minus the snow, which is real bad.
Yeah. And we don't even really get much to introduce us to Hanshiro, because we're quickly cut to October 1634, and Motome, the much younger Ronin, shows up.
Yes.
Asking the same thing as who we can probably assume is going to be the main character. For those who like historical context, this movie does have quite a bit of historical base to it.
Sure. This
is in 34 years since into the beginning of the Edo period. And the Edo, for most Westerners who aren't aware, is much of what we think of with the Japanese classic samurai films, or when we think of quote-unquote medieval Japan, even though technically the Sengoku period's a little bit more like the Warring States era, more medieval than what we would think. Sure.
It is honestly like the main definition of, I think, what has become the idea of a Japanese period drama. It's right smack dab in like the very end tail of the samurai era. It still has a lot of that classical dress, classical hairstyling, the very stiff and formal speeches. So like it's very recognizable even if you're not, nose deep into samurai films. Like you're going to be comfortable enough watching it even if you have like a base level of understanding.
Yeah, it looks very Japanese.
It looks so Japanese.
I mean, it is Japanese, so.
It is, but I would argue that like even, and I'm granted a lot of it comes down to just modernism, right? Like a lot of Miike's other films have either more modern settings or even just more modern-esque characters. With this one, he spent a lot of time and detail making sure that the characters looked the part, spoke the part, so that way it felt very much like in line with what the original ones looked like. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely is different than what we normally see him work with.
It's no punk/down samurai.
That's true. That's very true.
But what I like about this opening, because even though we had that little bit of an opening, I feel this really sets the movie.
Yes, I agree.
Because this starts the discussion of honor, where the Ishii clan is in a tough spot.
Yeah.
If he dies on their land, he gets more honor in his death, but hey, he's a penniless Ronin, why should we honor him that way?
True.
Or if he's out of coin and just wants the money and will flee, He's just going to bring more to him.
That's true. That is true.
And I also like how polite they are in the way a lot of Southern people in the U.S. are polite, where it's a backhanded politeness. They're only doing it out of...
Well, it is a upfront politeness. It is a formality almost. Less of polite and more formal. Just because I think even one of the characters says, like, there's a way of order of things. We are still samurai. And you can see that division very clearly, especially once we get really much farther down the movie, how the big house, everyone is, as best they can, fitting to this mold so strictly. Everyone is in uniform of some kind. Everyone has the attire, the hair. Everyone is dressed to the nines and also, like, doing their job all day long. No fun. Sort of mindset compared to the penniless man who has come in, who, even though he is penniless, is at least trying to pull himself together a little bit to look a bit like the part, and yet never quite manages it.
Yeah, well, it also makes sense in the context of a house or a clan that's rising to prominence, especially in this, what is one of the more peaceful times in Japanese history.
Sure. It is also an interesting discussion because it focuses the audience, who have a much more modern mindset, back into this very strict way of thinking of just going ahead and setting the stage from both perspectives of, well, this is what's most important to us. Here are the rules that we have lived our whole lives by. We need to continue to follow them for peace and order. Versus, a more heartfelt, like, sense of right and wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And also they're having to set up the explanation of what the suicide bluff is, which I know it's exposition, but it's kind of necessary to explain the clan's predicament and also...
Yes.
Get people who aren't familiar with what that idea is up to date.
I do think, though, that the way it's handled is very smooth and very clean. You don't feel like you're being, like, walked through any scenario. It just feels like you're finally getting to meet the characters and kind of hear their thoughts, as opposed to being, like, handed all of the information up front, like a lot of TV shows, I think, end up doing.
Yeah, no, exactly. And also it sets up not necessarily that the Ishii clan are horrible people.
Sure.
I mean, they ultimately end up being assholes, at least the people in charge at this point. Not even the head of the house. The head of the house is out.
Yeah, he's not even here.
And it's the head retainer who's in charge. But they also clearly lay out the predicament the clan's in, where they state that other clans have fallen for it, and then Ronins came by the flock asking for money. And others were taken on as retainers, but they've also had the same issues of people expecting one or the other. Either they're going to get some money or they're going to become a retainer for the clan.
Yes. But
now they have a third option that they think of, like, hey,
this is a good option, they think.
What if we just let him do it?
Yeah, it is. It's honestly, like, the most corporate version of, like, a discussion, especially when it's... I think this movie does a very good job of, no matter who is speaking when, you are constantly aware of the fact that there's not a ton of steps in between the decision maker and those affected by the decision in this movie. It is almost like a 2-step process, really. And I think cutting out all the middleman that normally a much more, like, drama piece or a political piece would have to have some version of realism, cutting it down to having just these, like, 3 tiers, really, helps a lot with the audiences being able to have compassion for... Honestly, the characters were meant to, but also understand and see why we have this quote-unquote villain.
No, exactly. Well, and you also understand their standpoint, too, is they're not trying to get bankrupt. They're not trying to bring on more retainers. This is their way of, like, it's their drawing the line in the sand, or drawing the line in the guts.
Yeah.
Of making an example of Matome. Which also, his actor, Nagayama, also has some very nice, subtle cues in his acting, where he has a surprise face of when they say, "Oh, you'll meet the Lord," and then he's a little bit hopeful, and then when he opens the box and it's the funeral attire, he's like, "Oh shit, okay, maybe this isn't going so well for me."
Yeah.
And also just the way they film and shoot this movie too is when the Ishii clan opens up his blades.
Yes.
We don't see it initially. We just see them open it up and they're like, look at this. And it's a nice way to build the suspense for someone who hasn't seen the original.
Definitely. And the way that it's acted and portrayed and the camera angles really lends it to having a very bigger mystery. Because even if you're familiar with this style of movie and like kind of the trope of having the wooden sword being there, it's not something that's like the first thing that comes to your head because of how well it's acted right here.
Oh, exactly. And also, there's a little bit of... And yeah, once we do finally see that the blades are bamboo, it's like, oh shit, the ruse is up. They're kind of calling him out for it. And you think like, okay, maybe there's some chance and maybe he'll get out. They'll just make a fool of him. He'll leave with no money, no position.
Yeah.
But no, they're going to force him to do it.
Which is, I think, where it turns from being a good strategy to, you know, keep their position and their money and their power to just, all right, we've taken the point too far. And I do like that there is a hard line in the sand for that, because the rest of this movie is not necessarily based on just the standard, like, we must fight the one bad guy. It is very much the building of these characters and their relationship and why this death is important.
Exactly. We also get this exposition of how great the House of Ishii is and how noble his death will be because, hey, no one has the drive to actually do this anymore.
Yeah, it's such a stiff speech that even the man giving the speech does not seem super convinced by it.
No, I think he is. He's more so...
I think he has bluffed himself in the way that, like, I don't think he's convinced by it. I think if the roles were reversed, I do not think he would be convinced by his own speech, though. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with that.
Like, he believes very firmly in the core idea of the house. However, he has obscured it and is now, like, kind of spitting nonsense underneath the disguise of, like, oh, well, I'm doing this because we have to keep the house as best we can.
It feels very what we think of in, like, I guess, Elizabethan or Victorian dramas, where it's like, I have to maintain my honor. He has challenged me to a duel. I must meet him in the field.
It is, honestly, a big trope for period dramas across the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, hell, Kurosawa adapted 2 Shakespeare movies.
Exactly.
Yeah. But also, I think there's some interesting... misleading for an audience where his begging for his life feels more that it's his fear of death for a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, his pleas are real desperate and just like... I also think it's kind of funny and interesting how tense they all are, even when he has, like, a bamboo blade in front of him, of, like...
They are all so jumpy.
Yeah.
The whole movie, every bad guy in this movie is so jumpy.
Yeah, I wonder if, I don't know, maybe they're afraid that, hey, his samurai spirit is so strong that even with the bamboo blade, he can take them out.
I like that because it does tie in with the rest of the movie. However, I kind of get the, like, impression that everyone is jumpy because the boss man... who, like, I'd like to think, but we have no reason to think, that the actual head of house keeps this man in check, but he's not here right now. And so everyone is so on eggshells from this kind of crazy man. Like, because clearly he has such a, stick up his butt about, you must speak correctly, you must do everything the most formal way possible. Like, there's such a pomp and circumstance around every single thing that he is trying to do. He makes everything into a display. And that it kind of comes off, if you think long enough about it, about like, wow, what a person to not just have to work for, but to have to stand in front of 24/7.
I mean, they'd be honored to. It's the noble house of Ishii.
And if you sneeze wrong, death to you.
Maybe. But we do have the reveal that he's actually in need of money for a sick child and wife, which in a way can feel like it's a weak plea to try and keep his life, that he'll come back.
I would say the way that it is presented is very smartly done, where it does kind of feel like, okay, well, maybe he is lying. Because, like, it's pretty standard tropey stuff, isn't it? Like, oh, you have a sick wife and kid? How many kids you got? Like 20 children? You work at the mines? Woohoo.
Yeah, I guess. But it's also a way to establish early on that, hey, his death isn't going to be good. And
very true.
Like, the bamboo blades end up becoming symbolic and kind of this foreshadowing symbol of the next portions of the movie.
True.
I also appreciate the tenacity written in for the Ichi clan, where they're not giving him a way out. It's this is the only way. They're not even going to let you. At this point, you've drug it on so long that they're not even going to let you go in disgrace. You're going to have to follow through with it.
That's true, but there is like a singular line in this speech that he gives that, like, I think for most, especially like a Western audience, I think would really be like the tipping point of like, okay, no, the honor thing bullshit now. Because his line is something along the lines of, well, if a samurai says he's going to do something, he has to do it. And you have already said you're going to do this. Mm-hmm. And it's like, all right, well, some context clues here, my man, would be important, obviously.
Well, I think that's an interesting point just because in the history of Japanese cinema, especially post-World War II, where most of their war movies, at least the ones I've come across, are very anti-war.
True.
And we even see this in, I'm going to bring it up again.
Yeah.
Godzilla -1.
Yeah, no, it's a good example.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's still crazy that we're still making compelling movies based around a similar subject matter.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
But also, the brutality that Miike brings to this movie in his ritual suicide.
I would say this scene, if you had any questions on whether or not this was a Miike film, this almost 5-minute long death scene is undeniably Miike's work.
Oh, this is where he shines so well, and where I think, like, really the brutality of what they're putting this man through starts to sink in, and where it's necessary. And the original is a little slow on it too, but it's much quicker than this one. And I'm not going to try and compare them as much to each other. They're not really like in a way, it doesn't feel like it's a remake. It feels like they're based off the same source material.
Sure, I like that.
And yeah, like when the blade breaks and it continues and it's still not working, and it's just like, oh, like you feel it in your own gut too.
The other thing that's unmistakably Miike, and it's almost like a tease from him, is the like initial strike, the initial stab with the wooden sword is not standard Miike where like we are seeing all the guts and stuff. It is a more traditional like, oh, we're seeing the reaction of the faces. Yeah. And then it pans down and we get a more standard Miike version of things.
Ish. It's really bloody. It's not like gory, guts everywhere like Ichi the Killer, the dude getting split in half.
No. It's extreme for the environment that this movie is. Like he's definitely taken what would have been probably honestly a 1-minute scene at best and moved it from, okay, here's a little bit of blood, maybe some splatter, a face reaction scene, to 5 minutes. All of that plus we get to see stab and full death, and like the whole Miike works without being extreme in his own way. It's extreme for like this style. Yeah,
and the one thing I'm glad you brought up that other characters, the rest of the clan is kind of wincing at all this. Yeah. It just shows Chijiwa's resolve. Or Motome, I'll probably flip between the names, sorry. His resolve in following through with it, because he's under the assumption that if he does this, they'll give him the 3 Ryu, and his death will have meant something.
Exactly.
At least it will have kept his child and wife alive.
Yeah, definitely.
But it also shows that even the rest of the people in charge have pushed the rest of the clan over. Yeah. The rest of the Ishii clan, the people who are reacting negatively to it, it's too much for them as well.
Oh, it is, but it's also interesting because even though it is too much for them, no one leaves, but no one interferes. They are at like a paralyzed standstill, which is interesting as opposed to like, I think honestly a different, more modern retelling of this, I think would probably have a different outcome, at least at the end. This one, there is that, like, that bindingness to this house and to this clan that I appreciate is a hard and fast resolve, even if you can tell that, like, not everybody here is, boner hard for honor as that one guy.
No, exactly. And the person who's boner hard for honor is the second Omadaka, who's supposed to cut his head off, where it just shows his cruelty. He's kind of truly the villain in this.
Yes.
Even though the head retainer set all this in motion.
Yeah.
The second is not cutting his head off like he's supposed to and pushes it to the point. That's what makes it more excruciating.
Exactly.
Is the head retainer has to step in and do the job of the second.
And he is the slowest man on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does the character walk with a limp, so he is just slower, but also, like, he waits forever for his second to, like, get up and do his damn job. Then his second is like, no, I want to see how this goes. And he's like, okay, I guess I'll do it. And then, slowly makes his way over.
No, even he's pushed to the point. Like,
he is, but there is not a hurriness to this stride.
After he realizes he's not going to follow through with what his duty is.
Yeah.
There is a hurriness to him after that. But there is a very nice juxtaposition of this shot cutting to the red armor, just to show that, hey, this is all for the pride of the Ishii clan.
I do think that's the one thing that I don't think translates as well as, say, someone who does watch a lot of this specific, like, styling and time period of show. The armor seems almost to represent the guy that we are most familiar with now, the temporary head of house. But it's not. It's meant to represent the actual head of house, who is, again, not here.
The founder of the Ishii clan. Not even the current head of house, the founder of the house.
True.
And even then, it's held in, like, a sacred spot, like a family shrine.
Exactly. So I think that's the only part that, like, doesn't necessarily, like, come across quite as quickly. But I do think by the end of the movie, you do understand the concept.
Yeah.
I just don't think it has the same weight as if you had, like, come in knowing it.
Yeah. And honestly, I kind of like these shots better than the original. Don't get me wrong. The original is a masterpiece in leagues above this movie in many regards.
Sure.
But the red in the armor just has that better tint to it than a black and white movie.
Yeah, I do. Okay, this movie has me very flip-flop because this movie is relying very heavily on the color red to be symbolic. However, it's really only in, like, the first and the last half of the movie, which can be fine, but there's not necessarily, like, a color adjustment anywhere to, like, get us either in a black and white or a more muted version of things. It's done with the set, which is also, like, fine, but those are two separate visual concepts.
Yeah.
And once we get to the next backstoriness, is where I started, like, losing some of the, like, okay, well, I see why this is not on people's top list.
I feel this movie probably would have done better in black and white because, don't get me wrong, the courtyard,
yes,
pretty
it's beautiful,
pretty in color, but would have been even prettier in black and white, especially with, like, the Sujibon style wood paneling around everything.
Yeah, no, I unfortunately greatly agree. There's a lot that is... This is one of Miike's prettiest movies.
Yeah, but hear me out. Imagine this movie in black and white, but using red like Sin City used red.
That's exactly what I was thinking, and, like, by the time I got to the end of this movie, I was kind of craving just a little bit extra artsiness. Because the camera angles, the attention to detail, the dialogue are all wonderfully done. However, you do lose some of the, like, leading points that are supposed to be done visually throughout this movie. Like, the difference between the rich and poor houses is not as great as I think it could be, partially because we have, like, this green that kind of washes everything.
Yes.
And, like, while it's cool and while I like it, it does lose the effect a little bit.
I can see that from an artsy standpoint, but it also works, I think, in the fact that the green feels more softening.
It does.
Like, even though, yes, it's poverty, they're still surrounded by nature.
It works, but it works in the same way that, like, the idea of nature works best in a book versus, like, having that parallel in a movie makes it much harder for the audience to, like, because even though this is a long movie at 2 hours, we spend most of that in dialogue format, so, like, visually we don't really have a ton of time to, like, dissect anything. You really do need, like, some bigger hints. And so either have the green be much more vibrant during the, like, happy memory scenes, or get rid of it altogether.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I can see that though, but looking at Nobuyasa Kita's cinematography roles,
no, it does match his other works.
Yeah, it's a fuck ton of other Takashi Miike movies that would take a while to get through, but I can see it now because he also did 13 Assassin, Crow Zero 2, the live-action adaptation of Blade of the Immortal, and I'm very curious now because he also did First Love. Curious how you find that when you finally do watch it.
Yes.
And also Miike's more recent movie that I'm interested, Lumberjack the Monster.
Yes. Yeah, no, like it does match his other works. I just think that would have been the thing that pushed this a little bit higher up on like the Miike ranking list for me. Because it's good. Yeah. It's very good. The bones are really solid. The story's very good. It's very compelling. The acting's phenomenal. We have beautiful shots. I just need a little sprinkle, a little something extra.
If we do this again, Juvenile Love Bang Bang A. Or Bang Bang Juvenile Love A, or whatever the hell it's named. Yeah, I think you'll appreciate that much more.
Okay.
But we now cut back to our main character. The attempted deterrent doesn't work, and he's like, no, I'll go through with it. But it also is showing his character and his brand of honor, where he's not going to take their pity.
Yes.
And he's going to die on his own terms with a samurai's dignity or lack of dignity, where it's showing he's cut from a different cloth because he's not going to change into the white formal attire of a samurai because he's... At this point, you're kind of actually, I don't think you realize this now, but he, in a way, he's comfortable moving down the social ranking, but he can't escape it at the same time, so he's going to die as a ronin.
Very true.
And in the courtyard, he's asking a request for Omadaka to be his second, if you remember the second from the previous ronin's death.
Yes.
Which good inklings that something's amiss as... building suspicion as he's gone missing along with Matasuka Hayatonosho.
They're very traditional names. They're kind of hard to say.
And Kawabe Umanosuke. Yeah, which there's something I picked up a little bit on this. I'm very proud of what I do pick up on, like, the little musical cues.
I'm so proud of you.
Because it's very slight. It's just like kind of like it's not even like a bass drop. I can't describe... I'm so musically illiterate, I don't know how to describe, like, the little, like, kind of chime that they give to that, hey, there's fuckery afoot.
Yes, no, the music in this movie is good. I wouldn't say it's outstanding or exemplarily noteworthy, but it is well done, and it does match the movie very well. The music's, like, big keys are really there to, like, hammer home big emphasis moments, and in this moment they change from having a very, like, the key that we were in, which was kind of a standard major-esque. It was not like overly happy major, but it was a pretty standard chord structure, and then we drop down into a different key range.
Yeah, it's like a darker finding what's her name? The leaf dipshits in Zelda.
The leaf dipshits in Zelda,
the Koroks.
The Koroks, the little poop people.
Yeah, the leaf dipshits.
Yeah, the little poop people. Yes, it is similar in styling because both use very traditionally Japanese instruments, especially percussion-wise. And yeah, the drop that you're hearing is like a drop in key change, which works out really well because it not only alludes to the fact that there is fuckery afoot, but it also is our first hint that our main protagonist, which so far we've had, viewers' good faith, is like a quote-unquote good guy. Because he's the first guy we see, we're assuming that's just kind of what you're conditioned to do. This is our first guess that maybe he is not as perfect as we were assuming. And I'm saying that in not necessarily like he has ill intent, but like the music is hinting at a violence.
He is what's the term? What's the phrase? It's like beware a quiet man or beware an old man in a young man's profession.
Yes.
Something along those lines. That intensity of like, oh fuck, I'm gonna die here kind of things. Because that's the thing that the one thing I will praise about this movie is, and it's I think partially it owes it to the original, is its ability to ramp up the tension.
Yes.
In just a matter of a couple phrases or a couple sentences. Because what ramps it up is he's like, oh yeah, by the way, Chijiwa was more than just someone I kind of knew.
Yeah, he was a good acquaintance. And I love the words he uses for it because he does mention, like, oh, I knew him. Well, no, he was actually a really good acquaintance. Or, like, someone I knew well enough. But he never, like, leads into, like, he was more than just someone that I worked with.
Until this point.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's a good way to, like, really start kicking off the next phase of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's revealing that he was actually close to Chijiwa. That's his last request. He's like, hey, hear a story from me that maybe this will inspire you. I can't remember in this one if they actually use the same phrasing as the original of, well, the tale, like, I think the original says something along the lines of, the tale I tell you is the fate that befalls those of today might be your fate tomorrow.
I do not think they use it, but I like it.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's where, like, this steps down a little bit from the high art that kind of higher,
yeah,
quote unquote, that the original is.
Sure.
But we cut to 16, 17, and here's the thing. I bitch about flashbacks. I
was gonna say,
most of
this whole movie is a flashback.
But here's the thing. It's not used lazily. That's the thing. The reason I hate flashbacks.
Yeah.
I hate flashbacks so much when it's, like, climactic moments where it's like, oh, by the way, I knew this person. And then it's like 2 minutes of them, like a stupid, shitty montage of, like, hee, we're frolicking through the woods together. This uses the flashback as the storytelling method to explain and build the tension of what's to come.
Sure. No, I agree there. I do. If I'm going to have to watch someone's flashback and exposition, this is the preferred way. I do think it is an interesting way of breaking up the film because it essentially creates 3 acts to the film. However, again, this is a 2-hour-long film and we get most of it being dialogue and exposition and without a whole lot of, like, visual interest to keep you going.
Yeah.
This is, I think, the part where, like, yes, I do find their relationship interesting. I do want to know what happened. However, this is also the boring part.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree. I won't lie. I did get a little bit bogged down rewatching it. Like, when you watch it the first time or do, like, your first rewatch, but when you're watching it for, like, the second or third time, this part does slow down quite a bit. So
it does. And that's the unfortunate part because all of this is needed.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of the build up here, all of the way they show this family dynamic is so important. And it's honestly very well done because I don't feel like any of these people don't actually know each other. This feels like a very normal, like, realistic setting for a period drama.
Yeah, well, it's also setting up that, hey, Chijiwa was really important to him because he's his friend's son.
Yes.
And it's also introducing where they're going and why they are such a downfall in Ronin. They used to be prominent, but the clan fell due to them not destroying or doing... I think this movie is a little bit more vague on what exactly happened. Of, like, they were told to destroy Hiroshima Castle.
Yeah.
But they actually did repairs. I think in the original, they say that you did undirected repairs, basically. So basically, they kept the castle in a state that wasn't suggested. And so this is how they get vacated from their land in 1619, which just shows how quickly this movie's time frame goes.
That's true, yeah.
I mean, Chijiwa's probably, like, in his early to mid-20s by the time he dies.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But it's a tough spot as his friend is dying and says he should have committed Hara-Kiri to plead for the castle to remain, but Hanshiro counters that the shogun raises and lowers men at will. And this is where I will say the tone, I keep comparing it to the original.
But you kind of have to.
The original's so good, though.
Yeah. The
shogun raises and lowers men at will. And this is where tonally the movie shifts, where the original movie is more focused on honor and doing quote unquote the right thing, being compassionate, that in times of peace we shouldn't have enemies, basically. Yeah, no, the rules of war don't apply to the times of peace. Yes, and in this movie, honor doesn't hold what it used to mean, and it doesn't matter. You just you should live out your life as best as you can. Sure. Yeah, no, I agree. I do think that the movie is definitely trying to have some political say over the gigantic disparity between
because again, this movie only really shows us more properly 2 ways of living. In wealth with excess, or in so much poverty that you're eating water dirt.
Yeah, because we cut to Ito in June 1620, and Hanshiro's in poverty, his walls are rotting, the paper in the shoji screen has holes in them, they don't have the money to repair them, basically.
Yes, and this is where the sets for this movie, there are times where they are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they work really good in both the poor version and also the very wealthy. Like, think the demon bull is an incredibly powerful symbol. The red armor is very well shot. Some scenes for the poverty, I think, work well. I think specifically the school scenes work best.
The school and the introduction scenes, where it's like heavily focused on the architecture and not the stuff happening within the structure.
Once we start moving to the inside of the structure, we've seen such better portrayals of people living in poverty, especially during, honestly, similar-ish Japanese time periods, where instead of...
the lower depths, and Seven Samurai.
Seven Samurai, a great example, where, honestly, every single poor character does not feel like they are living in just poverty. They feel like they're living in someone's garden shed that hasn't been maintained in 45 years. And while I get it, I understand that, like, it kind of is meant to, like, show, like, oh, well, they have nothing, but they're surrounded by beauty and nature and each other. Cute. However, it does not get the point across as well as the rich versions that we had, and we honestly don't get a whole lot of those. We only see the bull, I think, twice, and they're very brief. We only see the red armor, I think, 3 times, and again, very brief.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we see green ivy walls on a quote-unquote functioning door. There is not, like, a...
The green's behind everything. That's the thing where you're bringing up, and I see where you talked about where, like,
constant. Yeah,
I see where you're saying where the green should have been either like really vibrant or should have been kind of omitted, because that. Well, I think that also just shows their poverty, is they're not living in a highly manicured or human built environment. They're living in a hut or a house that is on the fringes of society. They're living within the wilderness.
Yes.
And I think that does show through, because at the same time, the walls are so rotted that you can see the greenery through them.
I would agree with you, except the movie unfortunately makes a point of only really having these 3 classes, and we don't see the middle class ever again after the death of our friend.
I wouldn't even say... So, here's... the samurai are definitely the higher class.
They are.
We see... lower class. The middle class is...
We see them standing below the main class.
Yeah, who's supposed to be the kind of quote-unquote middle class. It gets a little bit more complicated because later on the samurai became indebted to the merchant class, where they owed them a bunch of money, but societally the merchants were supposed to be way, way below them, but they held all the power because the ruling class was indebted to them. But... the middle class is supposed to be the masterless or the ronin, because they're technically of noble blood, but they can't afford to live that lifestyle.
Sure. I think the historical importance and also just the movie's own move towards the slightly more politicalized, like, take of this film would have worked a little bit better if the rest of the poor people, because we do see other poor people and how they live. She goes into town, they have a school. All of them, however, live in actively rotting sheds that, like, no one has done literally anything to do. So, like, no one has a board up to, like, block a draft.
Mm-hmm.
No one, like, he is making paper umbrellas. And, like, no one has bothered to put one up for rain. Sort of thing. Like, there's no effort at all into the surroundings that they have, and that I think is what hurts this, because we are relying so heavily on this idea of, like, visual symbolism, which falls through, unfortunately, because we are constantly seeing kind of an assortment.
Yes and no, in my opinion, because him making the umbrellas, he's using the same material that would have been used to repair the screens.
Sure.
And he's using it to fund their living style. And I get what you're saying, because the movie does rely heavily on very stereotypical tropes of, he has the ethics of a samurai, but he's making umbrellas, where he's doing this with this traditional dedication, but it's really low quality or low craftsmanship of what he's supposed to be doing. Hanshiro's not eating dinner to make sure the kids eat.
Yes.
The music's very melancholic and happy while they're not well off, but they're doing well. They're fishing for their food.
Yes.
Inkling of interest in his daughter, Miho, and dreams of becoming a samurai to take care of them. Very, very stereotypical.
Mm-hmm.
Not melodrama. Melancholic.
It's very melancholic. I do think that my only other, like, big complaint with this movie, other than, like, the visuals that could have been polished even further, is Miho herself. She is a dry piece of cardboard.
To be fair, and granted, I haven't gotten into, like, Edo era legends and stuff, but from what I know from the Sengoku era is, and maybe it's from our modern take, but in traditional storytelling, the women don't really have
She doesn't
names.
even go out to do things with other women.
Well, she's too sickly.
That's the part I hate.
Okay.
Because this movie already has... This movie relies very heavily on traditional stereotypes of this movie. She is the most stereotype.
So here's the thing, though, is... And granted, I don't know enough about this era's social class.
Sure.
But she's supposed to be of samurai. She doesn't have... Who is she going to hang out with? The peasant women that live around her?
Yes, homegirls living in squalor. Okay, I say yes because cooking, baking, and laundry were group activities kind of regardless of when you did it, because you could physically not do them yourself. You had to get together with probably 5 at least people to get everything done that you needed to, even if you're living in the, like, lowest level of poverty. Laundry still needs to be done. Food still needs to be made. And while you can cook some stuff at home, like they show making the little soup at home, baking anything, which, I mean, they did bake during this time period. Any market stuff that she had to do, she probably would have gone with another woman, especially an older woman. They don't show that. They show her going into market by herself and being hit on and, like, being, like, told, like, oh, you're so pretty, you need to get married so your father can finally retire.
No, it's the other people telling our main character that, hey, she needs to find a husband.
She gets told at the market, too, by 2 random old men, while another woman is pulling water from a well. Which is honestly why she's probably there in the first place, is to pull water.
I guess I don't remember that part.
It's very, very brief. And, like, almost immediately afterwards, she comes home and she's like, Papa, do you think, no, I could never say it. No. And then, like, sickly woman's her way out of the scene and, like, never says anything again.
But she's not sick till later, let's be fair.
No. Both her husband and her papa multiple times say, remember, you have always been a frail person and child.
True.
She has always been, like, on the breath of being blown away by a light, gentle breeze.
Okay. I see where you're coming from, I guess.
And, like, that's my one complaint is all of her, like, I don't mind that she does not have a big role, because clearly the movie is not focused on her.
No.
However, she is in it just long enough to be, like, annoying, that she does not, like, have any real personality other than being frail.
Yeah, I can see.
She has time in the movie to, like, be doing something.
Yeah, she's definitely relegated to more of a back role, and I mean, that's the original, too. She's not much of a character in that one either. She's even less of a character in the original than this one.
I think I would prefer that, because unfortunately in this one, she does have quite a lot of screen time. She has quite a bit of screen time as both a young... The young version of her is honestly more, like, compelling, because she has 5 whole seconds to show interest in the other boy when, like,
they're cleaning the books.
When they're cleaning the books, and, like, she has some version of, like, personality at that time. And then, but when she's older, we see her for all of the baby scenes. She has a grieving moment, which, like, we feel a little bit bad for her, because, like, that does suck. But also, like, you've said 5 words, and you've been on screen 20 minutes. It's a little bit strange. Like, she's not even in the background serving tea or, like, cooking or anything. She just kind of, like, shuffle walks between the door and the guys.
Yeah.
And she does shuffle walk. This whole movie, it's very shuffle walky.
The typical seen, not heard kind of stereotype, I guess.
Sure, if we're going to play into that part of the period, that's totally fine. But I would prefer, like, how the original did it, where she's almost not a character, she's almost not in the movie. Perfectly fine. Just be like, I miss my wife. What did she look like? I don't know, like a woman.
She had tits.
She had eyes. Wow.
Depends on where you're looking. Up or down.
Doesn't matter. Like, I would almost prefer that, because unfortunately she is in this movie just, like, with enough screen time, with enough lines that, like, we could have done something here. Mm-hmm. Because he's already taking a slightly more modern version of the tale. We've already made it more political, but we're holding on to a lot of the original ideas and concepts. Again, also fine. But at this point now, like, especially, like, towards the end where she's like, oh no, I might be a little sick. No, Papa, I'm fine. Go on, do your umbrella business. I'm sure you'll thrive. Like, girl, lay down, die.
Be more, oh no, Oto-san.
Yeah.
Or, you wouldn't even use honorific, would you? It'd be just like, Oto, I think.
I don't know, because she says 5 words. And half of them are Papa!
She says more than that. She does not say Papa in the least.
She might as well. But she is my only other big complaint, because, again, of how long she is on screen. And how much she actually does get to say. She has opportunity for development. We're already taking a modern approach. Why not? Why not go for it?
I get it. But, in speaking of visually... This movie, the visuals are very subtle.
They are.
Because we cut to 1930 and Hanshiro is making much more umbrellas now. One, potentially showing he's gotten much better at it and he can make it much faster now. Or 2, there's more of a demand for his umbrellas.
Okay, this is something I will give them credit for. There is some attention to detail in the visuals. It's during certain parts of this movie. And the umbrellas, I think, are a good example. His umbrellas at the beginning, even if you know nothing about paper umbrellas, do look a little bit rough. But you're like, okay, well, I'd buy it as a tourist. It looks okay. His later umbrellas, the once he's making a significant more of them, do look significantly better. And so I do think it adds to his line where he, like, told her, like, oh, the good way to do things is to practice and have patience and good will come to you. Don't worry, it's gonna work out. I do think they visually tried to show that. It's just kind of hard to do with umbrellas because they are subtle.
Well, it's also an interesting... it's an interesting thing you brought up about practice enough and do good and good will come to you. It's also weirdly a very American sentiment about...
It has inklings of the whole pull you up by your own bootstraps idea, doesn't it?
Very much so.
But you will see how that phrase, which... The phrase pull yourself up by your own bootstraps doesn't work because you just fall on your face. That's kind of how the saying is meant to go originally. It is funny that, like, he has the same outcome even though he's trying to do a slightly different version of it. Because even though they are doing better, they seem happier, they clearly are not thriving, right? Like,
no. Well, to the point where the other people who live around them are telling our main character that, hey, you need to marry off Miho. You need to just go and live your life.
Yeah, like, she's pretty enough that you could get a good bit of money. She would have someone taking care of her, and then you could finally go live somewhere else.
Yeah, and, well...
Or have money to eat.
Well, they have money now. I mean, he's making 10 umbrellas instead of 2.
That's true. And I do appreciate that, but I do think it is an interesting, like, dynamic that I don't know if the correlation works super well for, like, a very Western-minded audience. It's the equivalent of, like, fixing 2 cobbler shoes versus fixing 5 cobbler shoes. Like, yes, you're doing better. It's still not enough to feed a family of 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone has some food. It's just not quite enough food.
It's a family of 2 because they're kind of trying to reverse the roles a little bit.
True.
Miho does want to take care of him in his older age, and also Chijiwa is a teacher now.
That's true.
So he's making an income.
We hope.
He is.
We assume that he is making income. I like his little classroom. I think it's very cute. Mm-hmm. And I do, like, appreciate that they have already brought into the idea, like, he is a very studious child. I like that it ties in and that they show all of that, like, connection. Yeah, that even though he's not living the role of a samurai, he is still on an upper class. He's an intellectual. He is an intellectual. And also, like, he's clearly, like, putting in more work for the kids than, like, he's being paid to. He's putting in a lot of time and effort making sure that they know manners and they write well. He takes individual time with them instead of just, like, going through it very quickly. Like, I like the school scene a lot. Yeah.
And, I mean, it's all to build up an emotional attachment to these three, a little bit of a young love between the two, because they're saved. He's like, hey, I got this for Chijiwa. Here, you give it to him. Go visit him.
Yes.
And even then, when it's a little bit rushed at this point, in my opinion, from, like, how slow we've built everything up when Hanshiro asked Chijiwa to marry Miho. It's a very nice and sentimental piece because
it is.
Chijiwa's married. I know I'm hitting the J very hard there. It's hard as an American. Worried about the position, or he's worried about him not being a samurai. He's like, hey, I don't have the land or the title to make her happy. She'd be much happier married to someone else. And Hanshiro is like, no,
but do you love her?
Yeah, no, exactly. He only cares about the feeling. He's not married about the position.
Exactly. Which is very sweet. But this is where I would like to bring up that now, if you, especially when you watch it for the first time, this is, I think, the point in the movie where you realize that there have been several white cats just hanging around the background of this film.
Soon, we'll get to the white cats.
You start to pick it up, I think, in the school scene, and you go, there's quite a few cats. And then later on, you're going to come back to the cats.
Yeah, I'll get to that in just a few minutes here.
Okay.
Because we do have a bittersweet, like, heavy happiness. Because we know where this movie goes. We know what happens to Jiwa. They have the birth of the child, and then a very short-lived happiness, because this is where...
She literally waves him goodbye, and then, oh no!
Yeah.
As he's like, he hasn't even gotten to the end of the sidewalk yet.
Yeah, no, exactly. And this is where we start saying, okay, things aren't going very well. The suicide bluffs introduced to Hanshiro, which, honestly, here's one of my biggest issues with this movie, is this disconnect, where the suicide bluff is introduced to our main character, but never at a single point is it introduced, at least from our viewpoint, to Jiwa. Which,
that's true. Even if they had him, like, doing some reading on it, would have been nice.
Yeah, even in the original, they have a big scene of, like, in the original, they explain, like, the whole thing between the two of them.
Yeah, that would have helped. Because, as far as we know, he, like, ran into someone on his way to do other jobs.
Yeah, no, it's just barely mentioned to him. It's like, hey, by the way, did you hear? Ronin went to this castle a few days ago, and he became a vassal for them.
Yeah,
retainer. That's probably the right term.
Now that you mention it, it would have been nice. Because, like, there is hints at it. Like, when he's a young kid, he does mention, like, oh, that's the nice house. I'm going to get a job there someday. So that way, you know, Hiro's happy and that you can retire. And all, like, they build it up, but they never, like... And I don't want to say, like, oh, I need to be handheld through the movie. But, like, we've been handheld through the movie, so, like, maybe just, like, have him, like, open a book one day and be like, oh... I didn't realize this was a rule, or something like that.
Yeah, give a really dumb, shitty exposition moment to at least introduce him to it, because it doesn't go anywhere. It's just a weird scene of like, by the way, have you heard of this? Good day, sir.
I know, it feels like someone's just walking around town like, have you tried suicide?
Makes me think of those commercials in Tokyo Gore Police where the wrist cutters. It makes the blood tasty.
Yes. No, it feels like that honestly would have been helpful. Because then at least in that movie, like, yes, it's very silly, but you kind of like are getting a break from it, but also getting to see like what the world is built on and like how people would know about this stuff. Whereas in this one, you're just like, well, I assume we all osmosis to that information together.
I guess. But I also appreciate this moment because it's the last, like, little bit of inkling of happiness that we even have.
Yes, that's true.
Because
the baby is cute. And you do feel bad a little bit.
And his name is Kingu.
Which is hilarious and cute.
It's adorable.
It's so cute.
But the cat has come home to die.
Yeah, pretty much.
And this is the odd thing, because we saw in the intro there was a little bit of a focus on the cat, and there's in the climax, there's a focus on the cat.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find anything specific tying white cats to being unlucky. I know white is associated with, like, death and funeral rites, but it's also associated with purity.
Yeah.
And also, I couldn't find anything specifically for white cats. Everything I tried finding pulled up Maneki Neko.
Sure.
The lucky beckoning cat.
Yeah.
The only thing I could vaguely tie was something that wasn't... They had no sources for it. It was just like, here's our trip. Here's what we found. So I don't know how accurate it was. But this is like the third Japanese flick that I know of that has a white cat that's unlucky, like in Hausu, where...
Oh, that's true.
It's a big fluffy white cat that's the witch's cat.
That's true.
So the cat's supposed to be an omen of death. I don't know how to connect it to actual anything.
I can't get it to Japanese mythology is my problem. I looked into it too.
It's tied to a couple yokai, but that's all I could find of hey, they're kind of mischievous, but I couldn't find them being death omens or anything like that.
Yeah, I couldn't get to Japan with the death omen was my problem. English, Irish, and German have pretty similar tales of cats. Running across a cat that isn't yours is a foreshadowing of potential death. Usually associated black cat because black was considered the death color. I can see how maybe it got turned to white for Japan because again, white is a funeral color for them. It's a death associated color. But I couldn't find anything that truly tied that together. There's also the myth that cats steal breath in your sleep.
Yeah.
It was specifically for babies, but some people took it also to maybe they were trying to go for the whole well, it killed a kid and maybe that's the spirit following and seeing the end and the revenge. But honestly, everything I found was very weak. However, it's a very clear symbol, and so I'm not upset by it.
No, I appreciate it's very face forward, but the only other movie that I can think of that has a bad cat or there's a couple other folklore I've read about it too, but the Kuroneko, the black cat.
Yeah, no, it's
also a really good movie, which I didn't realize it's supposed to be an erotic movie.
Oh, well, surprise.
Yeah. Well, watching it by today's modern standards,
sure.
It's not very erotic.
Sure, yeah, what, one nipple slip and it's ankles.
No, not even. Yeah,
collarbones.
It is collarbones. Sexy. Yeah. But yeah, the cat's an interesting, the cat is the turning point of this movie. That's
true. I also appreciate that the cat is always seen in either just the scene right before big deaths or shown during the scenes of deaths, but always it is always a calm cat. He's just kind of hanging out, chilling, usually on a pillow somewhere, which is a nice way of showing that the world around is still continuing on despite all of the violence that is happening to this family.
No, exactly. And speaking of the family, there's this Chijio goes to sell his books to take care of Miho because she's sick.
Yes.
And there's the hint of selling the swords. He's because he's not happy with the price of the books he's selling. And so he's but your swords, I'll take that for a pretty penny. But he still has his pride at this point. Even though he has the pride with his swords, they put it against him eating raw egg off the ground.
Yeah.
So that way it doesn't go to waste. At least someone's getting use from it.
Yeah.
And also, he's starving, so that way his wife can have something.
It's very... You can see the trend that this family has.
Yeah, it's starting to pile up the shit of, hey, he had to sell basically his inheritance from his dad, his books. Now he's having to eat egg off... Well, literally eat egg.
Yeah.
But they also, I think, at one point they note that they're not eating white rice. You can see they're eating, millet.
Yeah.
Which I do want to try millet at some point. I'm curious.
I can make it for you. I've got it at the house. It's not that fancy.
I know where to get millet. I'm just curious because it's there's so many samurai flicks where they're oh, we have to eat millet, or in Seven Samurai where they're our people have only been eating millet. You've been the only ones eating the white rice.
That's true, and I do think that it's interesting because if you truly know the full spectrum of rice. Pure white rice, sushi rice, has been polished for a long time. And then, a normal middle-class person would eat what's equivalent to, a mixed brown bread level rice, where it's been polished a little bit, but, not a lot, light brown rice. These people aren't even eating rice.
Yeah, that's one of the thoughts of why people wash their rice was to get the dust off of it and mix out rocks that potentially would have been mixed in.
Always check for rocks.
Yes.
As a Midwesterner who sometimes eats lentils, you gotta look for rocks.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I got told that too.
Weird Midwestern facts from Chris.
Honestly, I think it's just if you're eating stuff, an old person will someday come up to you and be you gotta wash it, look for rocks. I'm I don't think there's rocks in my food anymore, Grandma. I think they got rid of the rocks.
I have never had to deal with that.
I felt one rock my entire life out of all these years of washing dry beans. I'm sure that I'm the one person, though. I'm sure everyone else has found oodles of rocks. I'm probably the odd one out.
How do you mix beans with rocks?
I don't know, but, like, that's what I got told originally, originally it was beans, like, you drew and dry beans, you have to rinse them to look for rocks, and then you can soak them, and then lentils were a thing, and, like, I got told the same thing, oh, you gotta check for rocks, and then, like, true rice, like, started to be a thing, other than just, like, minute microwave rice was, like, a thing, and I got told the same thing, you gotta check for rocks, and then, like, it got turned into, oh, you have to wash rice because it's too starchy, and now I'm always like, is it starchy or is it rocks? I don't know. Food Network tells me it's starchy. The old people in my life tell me they're rocks.
Fascinating.
I don't know. Rocks, man.
Movie about Japan and we learn about the Midwest.
Surprise. I don't know if you have to look for rocks in millet. Probably not. They save a ton of time.
I have no clue.
I don't know. I mean, it should be easy. Millet is tiny.
Yeah, but it's all to show dire times. I mean, he will die for her rather than give up his soul. Well,
and also, like, I appreciate that, like, they do a good job of trying very hard to portray it as, like, oh, he truly loves her. It's not just some commitment or some weird, like, almost sibling love thing.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know that they're not siblings, but he does call the other man father because he raised him now. So you're like, oh, it's a little odd. They do a good job of trying to, like, round it out and be like, no, he loves her. It's like, you know, father-in-law sort of father. It's a little bit strange at times. Don't think about it too hard, but, like, close enough.
Help me step on each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that bad. This one handles it much better than that.
Oh, yeah. But even, like, the filming of this movie, I know you talk about, like, the visuals aren't as symbolic. We get a little bit of autumn leaves as a nice contrast. Watching Miho struggle is a little sad.
Yeah, we do. I do appreciate, too, that, like, rain, while a little bit, like, on the nose, like, honestly, a lot of the themology of this movie is nicely done and, like, does tie in nicely with, like, the true sadness happens when there's rain happening, which then turns into snow. Like, the whole progression of weather that tries to happen is nice, it's just a little forced. And then we're gonna get to, like, how bad it looks later.
Oh, yeah, because it's a bit fast-paced, because Pancho is sorry for the troubles that Miho's sick. Can't really communicate his care of, like, hey, I'm sorry, I kind of pawned my daughter off onto you.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic, but you do kind of understand.
Yeah, because now Kingu is sick, and
not the baby.
The doctor is demanding 3 Ryu before he will even show up, which 3 Ryu was a fuck ton of money back then.
Yeah, this doctor sounds like a bad doctor.
Yeah, it's peak peril, and adding the red armor back brings what is to come, and even more menacing as Chijiwa heads to Hikone Castle.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, especially paired well and ice with their living condition at this point feels very cold and wet.
Yes, it doesn't help that, again, they're still living in a actively wet, rotting shack that after all these years, no one has done a damn thing to even, like, put a piece of tile on the roof.
He's making 10 umbrellas, but can't repair it just a little bit.
I don't even need repair. I need, like, someone to prop a stick up against the wall to be like, there, I lashed it together. Like, it doesn't need to be nice. I just need some level of, like, I put a bucket out for the rain, you know, like human nature.
Yeah.
Humans are going to try a little bit of something, even if it's not great, even if the resources are scarce. Something is better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. And this is where the movie really picks up its pace, because the rain turns to snow, which brings death to Kingu.
And then you get a real good look at the snow. It's ugly.
It's the very crappy, heavy white flakes.
And it's so in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
If anything is 3D in this movie, it's the snow.
It's not like Sukiyaki Western Jingo, where it just happened to start snowing, and they're like, this is awesome, let's do it.
Yes, that would have been very cool. And it's not even snow in the same way as, like some other movies have used rain or snow, and you're like, okay, I can see that it's staged, but, like, you know, the stage is over there and the camera's over here, so, like, it feels a little bit more natural. No. The camera is right up close, and the snow is right up close, and the snow does not seem to go back more than 5 feet.
Oh, no, not at all. This is the part where I think the snow is supposed to be 3D.
We
do get a little bit of snow later on where it's in his hair, but he's, like, the only character who has it in his hair.
And, like, if it was just snowing for him and, like, no one mentioned it and it was just, like, an audience perspective thing, I could totally get behind that, because there is a lot of room for artisticness in this movie, and especially this genre. But, like, this movie was so pretty. And then the snow happened.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's supposed to be, like, compared to the raw and heavy moment that just happened because...
Sure. No, like, I can totally see why they chose it.
Yeah.
But, like, again, like, even though I have my bitches about, like, how it could have been improved, this movie is very pretty. The cinematography is very nice. It's just the snow is real ugly.
Yeah. Oh, and the way that kind of works, too, because we're paired with the ugliness of them just leaving Chijiwa's body for them, and also just like, by the way...
They just, like, dump him and run.
Yeah, they're like, hey, he wanted 3 Ryu, here you guys go, because now we have the full story is like, okay, what he said was true. If they had let him, like, come back, maybe Kinga would have lived, and he would be without a father, but still alive.
Well, and then from an audience perspective, we now have a secondary rage of not only this, like, injustice of taking this idea of honor way too far, but also this, like, if we had not been beating around the bush and doing all this nonsense, maybe this could have happened faster and we could have gotten a doctor in time.
No, exactly. But also it's a heavy moment for Hanshiro because he didn't realize how desperate it really was. He's like, okay, maybe they're a little sick, but that's
they
the
kept
thing.
Saying they were fine. Well, I mean, the baby didn't.
Well,
but...
it didn't even really build it up because this is like maybe 15, 20 minutes of like the entire movie's run.
That's true. It's surprisingly quick compared to everything else.
And even then, like, if he was able to show up a couple hours early, would he still have been able to save the child?
Probably not, because that's not how middle-aged medicine worked. But, like, the idea from the audience perspective definitely is like, oh, if we had just been a little faster in getting the money, maybe we could have done it. And that adds to that fuel, that fire that the audience is feeling.
Well, and on top of that, even in his time of need, when they presented him with the leaf pastry, he saved it so that way he could bring it back to the family, which
that's true.
Ties back into the childhood and...
Yeah, and like the idea of sharing, it tastes better with someone else. Very
exactly.
Cute.
And then when Hanshiro realizes that, hey, he used bamboo blades, it's like, he has that holy shit moment of like, wait, he still did this with this shit?
And also, like, I appreciate that we did get to see the full violence much earlier in the film, but they don't re-show us necessarily the full violence. We get a little bit of blood, and it's definitely a traumatic scene, and it's clearly very upsetting, but we don't have to, like, fully uncover the body to realize what that truly means.
No.
For him to be livid.
No, exactly. And then also to show Miho in despair, because that's the other thing is...
She's not dead quite yet.
The pastry's also caked in blood. Well, not caked in blood. It's got blood on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pastry cake.
It's absorbed enough.
Yeah.
But it's such a heavy moment for Hanshiro because now you're like, oh shit, his entire world is gone within minutes.
Oh,
because the powers that be raise and lower men on their own whim.
Exactly. And while it all does tie nicely together, it is an interesting, like, diversion from a much more classical version of this tale.
Yeah, no, exactly. And what I like about the scene, too, is, in the transition from here on, is there's no real time to reflect as we return to the courtyard. Because we've had a good hour of a quote-unquote flashback. Because it's not like...
Oh, for one flashback. This is, like, way into the movie at this point.
It's not like the original where it kind of bounces back and forth. This one is a long stretch.
That's true. That's true.
And it's good because we can't relax. We keeps the tension going.
I do like it. I do like this build-up. I just wish it hadn't taken me an hour and a half to get to here.
I get it. But
I'm just a little impatient is all.
I get it. And it's a nice warning story for the house of, like, if they had that line of, like, hey... the fate of today could befall you tomorrow. It's a good way to call them out on their shit because getting praise while humiliating others and looking down on them is not a good look for a rising house.
That's very true.
And this is the part where I think the dialogue really starts to shine because this is the conflict of ideals. It's not just like, hey, you're a horrible person. I hate you because you basically killed my stepson.
And my grandson, and, like, probably my daughter, but I don't know that just yet.
You did? No, she's dead already.
Well, but he doesn't know that. He left before she died.
No, she died. No, she was already dead. She kills herself, like, right then and there after the pastry.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, no. His entire family's
everybody's
dead.
They're all dead. He's having a bad day.
Yeah. A very bad. So you had a bad day.
Yeah. No, the dialogue here does make it much more compelling and much more a balance of ideas. And I think it also raises him from just a very angry man to a vengeful almost spirit, like samurai level. Like, this is what honor should be.
Yeah.
Sort of, like, ideal.
And even then, like, his honor of, like, cutting the top knots of the 3 who are missing is so quickly revealed. There's not really a tension build up there. That's where, like, some of the movie fails a little bit. He's just like, hey, here's the 3 headbands.
I could...
Top knots.
I was gonna say, I could totally see him not saying and just having those 3 walk in shame later at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Could have been a very good build.
I mean, it's his way of humiliating their best swordsman, honor in returning their 3 Ryu, which, at the same time, like, part of the thing I don't like about the scene is this is where I think the flashback is used poorly.
Sure.
Original, it's used very artfully to show that, hey, he's a skilled swordsman, but it's done over, like, a period of, like, here, I did this on this day. I did this 2 days ago. I did this just yesterday.
Yes.
It builds the tension much more quickly than, like, hey, I took all 3 of them on at once, and hey, look how good I am.
That's true. I will say that is... While I enjoy watching it, because the fight that's about to happen is very cool to watch, it is a very, like, wow, he's the correct one, he's the justified one, so thus he can take on, 20 guys at once.
Well, it's also his way of showing it's like, hey, my ideals, I live by them, I'm able to do this. You guys can't even take out 1 swordsman against 3.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. Which, also we get some snow falling, which this is where
this is the ugliest snow.
Which I actually do kind of wonder if the snow, I know it's symbolic, I wonder if it's a slight nod to the human condition, which the original Hara-Kiri was directed by Masaki Kobayashi. He also did the human condition, which ends in the main character dying in the snow falling.
Sure.
I don't think it's that deep, but I kind of wonder a little bit, just enough.
I mean, there's a possibility. We know Miike's a huge nerd and, like, a movie buff. So there's a chance that, like, he was making a nod at that. I also think, though, that snow is just kind of a general symbolic thing that we see pretty regularly in movies as far as, like, a cold fury. It's turned the rain that was literally just happening has, like, transformed to snow.
Yeah, Lady Snowblood at the very end, she can finally release her anguish and screaming.
Yes,
in the
and
snow.
And having that level of, like, the pure white snow combined with the red blood is something that's been classically done countless times. So I can see it both ways.
Yeah. And now we get the final struggle where Hanshiro is revealing that, he's also sold... I hate this part.
Yeah.
He sold his samurai soul and he's fighting with bamboo blades himself.
No, okay, so, like, I like the fight scene. I did not need the big sword reveal, though.
No, it's poetic, but it's very weak.
It is weak, and I don't think that the symbolism needs to change, and I don't necessarily think the bamboo sword needs to change. I just don't think we need to be told about the bamboo sword. I would rather the fight just start.
Yeah, no, exactly. Just him start going at them and
just start taking people out left and right. Yeah. And then, like, the audience can realize, like, halfway through this, like, honestly, kind of long fight, that it's a bamboo sword.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things for this scene that I do think it has going for it. Is, like, in a way, it is... I think it's important to, you do have to kind of show it, because if you're just doing, like, your standard, like, samurai fights where it's so quick, you can potentially miss that it's a bamboo blade.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
It's also him, like, rubbing it in the face of that, I took out so many men, but hey, look at this bamboo blade, like, I did it with a bamboo blade, and you guys couldn't do shit about it.
I do, from a more modern, like, watching of this piece, like, I do like the whole, like, poeticness of, like, theoretically this is not a lethal blade, and yet he's going to turn it into one, just like they did with his son. Well, or stepson.
Yeah, well, and on top of that, I mean, they have the trampling of the top knots and the coins, because none of that mattered to any of them, really.
But yes, I also like that there's like a moment at this beginning of the fight where our main head guy is standing there waiting for him to just be killed by this mob of people, this, like, 25 plus mob of people. And when he starts taking them out in, like, mass droves, he just kind of slinks across the background and just, like, is like, whoop, time to go do something else. I'm late for an appointment.
Yeah, no, well, and we also get the slinking away of the white cat that's been on the dude's lap.
True.
Because it's like, hey, this is the downfall. This is the final, like, hey, the house cat is leaving.
Even the cat is gone.
Yeah,
no one can save you.
And we already know it's a futile fight, but ultimately, that's what's great about it, too, is he dishonors them because, yeah, he might not have killed any of them directly, but he took out their family shrine.
That's true. He sure as hell did. And it was a cool fight. Like, this movie is very long, and much like the death scene, the fight scene is drawn out, and it is lengthy, but you feel so justified in having this long battle.
Because it's a moral defeat.
Exactly. And, like, we also know just from, like, you don't have any hope that he is going to be done. He has returned the money. He has no one to go home to. And he has proven that he has the honor of a samurai. So he has said, I'm here to commit suicide. I just didn't say I was going to kill myself. You're going to kill me.
Yeah.
You just don't know it yet.
Exactly. And I mean, it's a way to, like, bring shame to the clan of, like, he takes
out a lot of them with a bamboo blade.
Yeah, we get one with, like, a cut on the head. Like, he doesn't actually kill them. But...
No, but, I mean, he, like, busts some shoulder blades. He does, like... And I do think that it is interesting if you, like, really, like... I think it's, like, the second time I watched this, I really started noticing it. The beginning of the fight, especially when the headman is still there and still watching, it is a very controlled, it is a very classic style samurai fight where it's few movements, but they're big, they're powerful, and they're calculated. And then as the fight progresses, he gets more and more angry and beast-like. There's more grunting, there's less dialogue of any kind from anybody, and he starts taking people out in much more creative and more just classic, like, fighting sort of ways, as opposed to having this perfect form and technique, especially once his blade gets cut.
It's like in Yojimbo when he's going, like, behind everyone's back and
exactly.
Taking out their businesses without directly harming them.
No, it is 100% just like that. And I think especially once he gets to the very end where he takes out the shrine and the armor and he, like, kicks it down and is, like, proving a point. At that point, he's like, I've proven I have honor and I don't need to prove it anymore to you guys.
Yeah. Well, and the honor of the end of the movie is kind of interesting, too, because even though he succeeds, and we're super happy for him, I mean, he finds peace in death with shame to the Ishii clan. But the shamed samurai just show up and end themselves real quick, or at least one of them does.
One of them is like, all right, yeet.
I wish they had taken a little bit more time on that to, like, kind of ritualistically punish them of having them commit ritual suicide in the courtyard, or not have them do it outside the courtyard because they're dishonored.
Have them do it outside, and also, like, get in the clothes, do the whole ceremony. Where's the, like, being handed the sword? Where's the pomp and circumstance? You guys said that was, like, your whole thing. Yeah. And now, when it's like, oh, I need a quick way out, I'll just do it real quick. No,
exactly. And we cut quickly from there to business as usual But in a way, it's all tainted, too. There's a heaviness to it that, like, the head of the Ishii clan doesn't have anything. They put the red armor back in its place. And
the only, like, note that the actual head of house says, and, like, the only clue that you assume as an audience that he knows that any of this has happened, is he goes, oh, you polished the armor. That's really good. That is a symbol of our house. That is something to be proud of. And you're like, as an audience, you're like, no, it's not. Meh. But also, like, when you stop and think about it, no one's told this man what has happened. No one has told him that a man with a wooden sword has taken on most of his men in one.
No, exactly. And also, how do you explain that, hey, these 3 retainers committed ritual suicide? There's not any real line like in the original where it's like, we'll just tell them they got sick and died.
Yeah, no, I do kind of wish there was, like, a quick little, like, help to add to the sweeping under the rug effect. But it is implied, and I can kind of get to there. It's just not as clear as it could have been.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I don't know. Maybe I tainted myself rewatching the original. Actually, I rewatched the original a couple times in the last month.
Sure.
But I don't know. For a Miike movie, it is interesting.
It is. No, it really is. And like I said, especially the violence portion, and I also think especially like how he portrays a commitment and a dedication in his love stories. I do think those are both clearly Miike's film styles.
Mm-hmm.
I think also a lot of the like cinematography of having like someone dead on and having lots of beautiful scene behind them, whether that's, you know, punk dystopian world or in this case, rotting vegetable patch. It all reads as Miike's work without any doubt. But I also know what Miike can make. And so, like, I get why this one is not super high on a lot of people's lists. However, I did really enjoy this one.
Yeah, and I think part of it is I know people have questioned if Miike's mellowed out as he's gotten much older.
Sure. I mean, it's time to do something new at some point, right?
Well, I also think that Tom S. did put it really well, is that the Miike that everyone fell in love with originally, he's the same Miike. It's just the industry's changed. There's not the V cinema that he started up in. He's actually grown more in popularity, so he's taking on bigger projects. He's not working where he gets 5 movies done in a year.
Yeah, and like also he has a reputation behind him now. Like I said, we know what he's capable of producing, and so it does set a level of expectation, even if it's just something that like you can't have a perfect movie every time you make something. That's just not possible.
Yeah, which is why I'm very curious about Lumberjack the Killer. Like,
yeah, definitely.
It sounds like old Miike, but at the same time, like, First Love was very much old school Miike, and this one, at the same time, it still works in different ways. I think that's why I admire a lot of his work, is even when it's not quote-unquote people's favorites or my favorite of his works, you can still see his touch to it, especially with the suicides. Yes. Where it's like, oh shit, this is very brutal. You're doing a very good job of not showing us the full picture.
Yes. Oh yeah, no, it's undeniably Miike's work, but in a way that I think, with the exception of maybe a handful of scenes, and honestly, like, with a quick fast forward, you can still enjoy the majority of the movie. It's a great way of, like, introducing some of the less gory concepts that, honestly, Miike is very good at. He's just always paired them with things that are a little bit harder for an average person to get through.
Yeah, no, exactly. It doesn't hit the super weird portions. It's not... It does a very good job of keeping everything grounded without going over the top, like something like Blade of the Immortal or certain aspects of 13 Assassins.
No, I think that definitely... And, like, don't get me wrong, I love 13 Assassins, and I do think that, like, if you're going to compare apples to oranges, like, it's definitely, like, the quote-unquote better movie. However, I do think that this is a solid movie. It's Miike, so, like, you know, I always kind of, like, am going in hoping for the best and expecting the weirdest.
Yeah, I am very close to forcing the lads to watch another Miike movie. It's gonna be one of the fucking weird ones. It's not gonna be it's not gonna be Audition or Gozu or Ichi the Killer. It's gonna be something weird still.
I think you can maybe talk him into one of the other ones.
Yeah, Yakuza Apocalypse.
Yeah, maybe.
So, Chris, good, bad, weird scale. How do you rate Hara-Kiri Death of a Samurai?
For me, this movie's just good. And I say that with the just included. It's a good movie, but it's not spectacular. I did enjoy watching it, and I do think if you are brand new to Miike and you're a little scared about getting into some of his more extreme movies or his more weird movies, this is a good, like, tipping of the toe. If you can watch this whole thing without needing to skip through any of the bloody scenes, maybe you can work your way into Miike. And if you can't, it's very easy to fast forward through the parts that are a little bit more, and still enjoy the, like, actual story part of this film. However, like I complained earlier, it's missing a little bit of something. And whether that's a little bit more character building, a little bit more modernization, or reverse that and just more classicalization, a little bit more difference of a cinematography to make it stand out compared to a bunch of other period dramas that came out about the same time. Something, just a little bit of something would have pushed this over the edge for me to be like a very good movie, but I'm still enjoying it. I'll watch it again quite happily.
But, like, make Miho an actual character or something, probably along those lines.
That would have helped for sure. honestly, maybe doing black, white, and red would have made us without changing a whole lot of extra.
Mm-hmm.
I would be interested to see if maybe in 3D, if that was the little je ne sais quoi I was missing. I doubt it, but maybe. I don't know.
I highly doubt that too.
But the acting is very good. The dialogue is very good. The set is fine. The costuming is fine. So it's all good. It's just not the superior piece that I know he can produce.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The man has made countless movies at this point. I can't expect every single one of them to be top tier. I enjoyed this just fine, and if someone wants to put it on again at a next group night, I'll watch it quite happily.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar vein. I think it's a good movie. It's not my favorite of his works. I think it is lacking in some of its tightness in its script, where there's elements or there's moments where it's just well, how does this get translated to this character, or how do they find out about any of this shit? It just doesn't hold that same grittiness. It's still good, but I think I'm also tainted by the original, so I might be a little biased there, where the original is much, much higher for me. The original is high praises, and this one is it's fine.
No, I totally understand. It's the same way with Western movies. The old ones, even if they're a little dated, even if they're a little grainy to watch, they tend to be better than the remake. And that's just kind of how it is. It's hard to remake these things and make them better.
Yeah. So, Chris, would you recommend Hara-Kiri, Death of a Samurai?
I would. I would give it a small warning. Warning, there is quite a bit of gore. Maybe have your remote nearby if it's a little bit too much for you. But I think for most people, yeah, this is a watch. It's even pretty easy to get in for a samurai film, because they do explain quite a lot of it for you.
Yeah, I disagree with your goriness. I think its bloodiness is very, very, very tame.
It is very tame. I think the only part that makes it for some people needing the skip function is there is now 5 minutes worth of bamboo suicide, which I can see how, for especially someone who's not into horror or gore, that might be a little bit much.
The cruelty behind it.
Exactly.
So.
And I do think that, if you are watching it and it is a bit too much, you will totally get the concept and understand the cruelty behind it with skipping it. But if that sort of stuff is not, a skip level moment for you, I do think it will add to the level of cruelty and the level of burning hatred you have for that end scene.
Yeah, I can see it. I don't know if I'm reluctant to recommend this movie. I'd say it is definitely worth watching, especially in Miike's repertoire.
Sure.
But I think I would maybe say watch it a little bit after the original, or maybe a year after watching the original.
Sure.
Just to get let the original sink in, and then just see how this is done a little bit differently. But I can also see it working for those people who don't watch old movies, who can't watch a black and white movie. It's the same story with a little bit of tonal change and character focus.
No, sure.
But it's basically the same flick.
Yeah, no, I can totally see what you mean by that. It is very good. Would I prefer the original? Probably. Will I go watch it now? Definitely.
Do it.
But, yeah, it's not a bad movie.
That time of the show.
It is. It is time for bingo.
Season 6 bingo. So, new listeners, new season, and new game. Chris and I are playing bingo, and you can play too. Rules for players are simple. 1 stamp per card per episode, including microviews and spotlights. Cards can be found on our social media at TGTBTW_podcast on Instagram and Threads, as well as TGTBTW on Twitter. Or if you have an email, most people have emails, but you are also free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And you can use any of the 3 bingo card variations, but each stamp must be associated with a season 6 episode. First place gets to pick a movie they would like us to deep dive on, as well as 2 micro reviews for season 7. Second place gets to choose a deep dive and a micro review. And third place gets 2 micro reviews, while 4th and 5th place get to choose a single micro review apiece. So feel free to share at us on social media or email us to participate. Rules are slightly different for ourselves, because we gotta make it a little harder. We only get a total of 2 stamps per deep dive. First to get a bingo in either of any of the good, bad, or weird cards gets to choose a movie that they feel fits that category for season 7.
Sure.
Chris, what do you have today?
I'm going to play my first one strategically because it's in my column. I'm going to go with Nicho gives a movie a good rating.
All right.
But secondly, for my other stamp, I'm going to go and give the old stereotypes one. I do think that this one, despite having a modernized version of it, really did stick to a lot of the old stereotypes that these samurai films are known for, and I enjoyed that.
All right. That is in your good edition and bad edition.
It is, in fact, in my good and my bad.
All right. I am going to go with weird.
Okay.
Nicho is stunned by Midwest weirdness.
Haha!
And then for my bad card, my first one on the bad card, I am going to go with issues could have been resolved by talking, because this whole movie could have been resolved.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
If Hanshiro had been told that, hey, we're not doing very well, man.
Yeah, no, I totally saw that one, and I agree. If we as a family had just come together a little bit sooner, I don't know, maybe we could have all fished together.
Exactly. So, but that's what I'll go with for this episode, so.
Totally good.
But, anywho, this has been the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Peace! Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always, check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace!